Hello and welcome to another episode of Gemstone Mine. I'm John, and today we're going to be doing another video deck primer. Today, I want to talk about a deck that I've been working on, which is not necessarily attached to any specific color month or arc or anything like that. Just a deck that I'm kind of excited about, and it ties into an episode of Commander Cookout. A few weeks ago, Brando and Ryan talked about the Imskir Iron-Eater deck. And today, I want to brew a deck that is built around that, but in cEDH instead. Be sure to check out the episode that Brando and Ryan did. Link will be in the description, and I should be able to get to show up on the screen over here. Once again, though, thank you for joining us here on Gemstone Mine as part of Commander Cookout Media Group. I think we're finally hitting our stride. So thank you for being here with us, and thank you to our sponsors, FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. So by the time this episode hits, Bloomborough is either going to be in pre-release or it's about to pre-release. Bloomborough's coming, and there's going to be lots of cards in rabbits and mice and otters and I don't know what else, but I'm sure there's going to be some new hotness in the set. I know there's a few cards that I have my eye on that I want to pick up for my decks, and I'm going to save some money using the promo code CCOSummer on FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. So let's get started by reading Imskir Iron-Eater. Imskir is 6 black and a red for a 5/5 legendary creature demon with affinity for artifacts. And when Imskir enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is half the number of artifacts you control rounded down. Finally, Imskir has an activated ability with 3 and a red, sacrifice an artifact. Imskir deals damage equal to the sacrificed artifact's mana value to any target. Now, if you caught that episode of Commander Cookout, you'll know that that activated ability was what the deck that Brando and Ryan talked about had focused on. This being a cEDH deck, however, I want to focus on the other ability, the triggered ability that Imskir has on ETB. Because drawing cards on ETB, oh, that's exactly what we want to be doing in cEDH. As a result, we're going to build a deck in Rakdos around Imskir, taking advantage of a lot of Rakdos' strengths, one of which probably will not come as any surprise to you if you've been playing or following a lot of cEDH. Before we can do that, though, we should have a brief rules discussion on how Affinity works. Now, with apologies to JudgeCast, the extended metaphor that I really like is one that they have used frequently to explain things like Affinity. I want you to imagine you're going to the grocery store, and you want to check out in the checkout lane with Imskir Iron-Eater. Imskir costs a total of $8 to make it work. However, it has Affinity, which means for each artifact you can show the cashier, you're going to knock that price down by 1. So if you can show that cashier 6 artifacts, Imskir is going to cost a black and a red. The cashier locks the price in, and then you can tap to, a black and a red and cast Imskir. That includes if you happen to be using just treasures to cast Imskir. So if you control 6 treasures, no other artifacts, you can lock in Imskir's price at a black and a red, then tap 2 treasures, sacrifice them for the black and the red, and cast Imskir. Yes, you lock in the price before you actually activate mana abilities. This is the technically correct way to cast a spell, and as we know, there's nothing Rakdos likes more than being technically correct. Now, Imskir is likely to draw us a ton of cards when he enters the battlefield. Even drawing 5 or 6 is probably going to get us way ahead, and with the density of effects we have in this deck, we should be able to then use that to turn around and start really getting ahead. I think there is also a case to be made for playing more of a value Imskir, when you're only going to draw 2 or 3 cards off of it just to get yourself back in the game, because there are a lot of ways in the deck to reuse Imskir. But I think the perfect scenario is definitely a haymaker. You try to draw 5-6 cards and try to go for the win right then and there. And usually, the card that is going to enable that is good old-fashioned Dockside Extortionist, the goblin we all know and love, or hate depending on your color choices that you like to play in cEDH. Because Dockside can make such a large number of artifacts, it can very easily make Imskir into a very large draw spell. So many of the black tutors that we're running in the deck are in there specifically to try to get Dockside Extortionist. We're running all the usual suspects. Vampiric Tutor, Imperial Seal. We're also running good old Demonic Tutor. We're running Entomb. we want access to Dockside early and often. It's just too instrumental to our game plan. Once we are able to land Dockside Extortionist, our goal is to then cast Imskir and hopefully draw into a tutor or one of the effects we will need in order to try to win the game at that point. In a lot of ways, I try to describe this deck as it's kind of like the Gruul version of Atali, but a lot more metal. The deck is running a number of packages as ways to potentially win the game built around Dockside, and being in Rakdos, that's probably no surprise that that's how we're going to try to win. However, we are also going to take advantage of a very common package in Rakdos in the form of Twin Flame lines alongside Dualcaster Mage. This is a time-honored combo in many low-color red decks, and it's not that hard to assemble. But we get to take advantage of the Twin Flame and other doubler effects in ways that many decks cannot. Just cast it on Imskir, draw another bunch of cards, pay a little bit of life, and hopefully from there being able to chain off to win the game. Our selection of doublers includes not just the classic Twin Flame, but also Heat Shimmer, Jaxus the Troublemaker, Molten Duplication, and Saw in Half. This gives us a small density which, minus Jaxus, do allow us to win the game on the spot if we happen to have a Dualcaster Mage in hand, and that is a pretty good place to be. They also all work well with Imskir, allowing us to essentially sacrifice and rebuy Imskir to be able to draw another fistful of cards and allow us to accelerate towards our game-winning combos. Jaxus is probably the loosest of the includes in that regard. I'm not sure how much I value being able to double up on and then sacrifice Imskir. For now, she's staying in the list, but she might be a cut later on based on more experience with the deck. As I already hinted at, this deck is built around Dockside Extortionist, and many of our tutors are going to be spent trying to get the little goblin into play. We're running a number of different combos that work with Dockside in order to win the game. Take caution when you're using these though, because oftentimes what you're going to try to do and to use as a virtual outlet will be to sacrifice or bounce or in other ways recast Imskir. You want to do this and make sure that you're not going to accidentally kill yourself by first generating infinite treasures and then casting Imskir and doming yourself. Instead, you want to get to a point where you're going to be able to draw 30, 32, 34 cards, whatever your life total is, leave a little bit of padding there. Cast Imskir, load up your hand, and then from there, it's just like casting Ad Naus. You go to a low life total and try to win. Our combo enablers with Dockside include classics like Cloudstone Curio, some of the new hotness with things like Dino DNA, and, of course, we're also trying out something hot for Modern Horizons 3 apart from just Imskir. We're running Chthonian Nightmare, which combos with Dockside and basically every other creature in the deck that we have to get us to a point where we can cast Imskir to safely draw a big chunk of cards and hopefully win the game from there. Being in Rakdos, we're also going to be on a Breach package. Breach is a little bit tougher to pull off outside of Jeskai because we don't have access to Brain Freeze or Savine's Reclamation, but we have most of the pieces we need to be successful. Oftentimes what we will try to do is load up our graveyard, and then we can potentially win with cards like a Chthonian Nightmare Loop. Now this doesn't actually win us the game, but it does get us to a point where we have access to our entire library as it sits in our graveyard. So what we will try to do at this point is to close out the game with one of two main finishers. Number one, we're running Mayhem Devil. Mayhem Devil plus Dockside not only controls the game, but can very easily close out the game. We're also running Orcish Bowmasters. Again, a fantastic control piece, which is still available in Commander, in spite of my own personal opinions on the Orcs. And when we're able to bounce this or reanimate this endly off of something like Chthonian Nightmare, that's a way to ping down the table and win the game. Finally, we're pulling in yet another card out of Modern Horizons 3 in the form of Molten Gatekeeper. Molten Gatekeeper is 2 and a red for an artifact creature golem, a 2/3 with whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Molten Gatekeeper deals 1 damage to each opponent. And importantly, Molten Gatekeeper does have Unearth for a single red mana. As an artifact, it feeds our primary game plan with Imskir Iron-Eater in the command zone. However, because it has Unearth, it is one that we can reactivate from the graveyard to get it into play to go off on our combo turn if we don't have easy access to something like Mayhem Devil. It's another easy way for us to close out the game alongside our Orcish Bowmasters and our Mayhem Devil, something that's not always super easy to do. Finally, We're also on good old Bolas' Citadel. Maybe it's a wrong include in a deck that is going to rely on ad nauseum, but it is an artifact that will up our count for when we cast Imskir. Number 2, it is a powerful way to see extra cards, even if it does cost us life. But number 3, if we're successfully pulling off a breach line and our other options are cut off, we could potentially just recast Bolas' Citadel if we have unbounded mana several times in a row, sacrificing a bunch of tokens from Dockside and the Citadel itself in order to just win the game on the spot. Now, a lot of the gold fishing that I've done with this deck has turned into some very fun moments of me kind of sitting there and giggling hysterically at some of the nonsense this deck can pull off. I've seen a lot of turn 3 goldfished wins with it, and it looks like a lot of fun. Let's go through a couple of mulligans now together. Our first opening hand is Ancient Tomb, Witchclaw Talisman, Cursed Mirror, Lion's Eye Diamond, Delayed Blast Fireball, Urza Saga, and Ragavan. I don't hate this opening hand. I think there is something to be said for trying to hope for an early top deck that produces colored mana so we can get Ragavan out into play. Dropping a turn 1 Urza Saga means that on worst case scenario on turn 3 we'll be hitting colored mana. I don't feel super strongly about that, and without access to black, I don't feel great that we don't have access to the Witchclaw Talisman to really get things going. I'd probably ship this one back overall, but it was interesting to talk about. Our next opening hand consists of Jaxus the Troublemaker, Mox Opal, Dauthi Voidwalker, Grinding Station, Command Tower, Jeweled Amulet, and Talisman of Indulgence. Overall, this hand seems a little bit stronger. I think what the hand wants us to do is to go turn 1 Command Tower and Jeweled Amulet, tapping to put probably a black mana under it so we have the option to go into Dauthi Voidwalker. Then turn 2, we can tap both of those to play our Talisman of Indulgence, pay 0 to play our Mox Opal, and at that point we have 2 mana showing, which is enough to be able to cast the Dauthi. It's not a terrible place to be. It does start to set us up a little bit. I think it depends heavily on our top decks. I think in most metas I would throw this one back though. Alright, our next opening hand is definitely unconventional, and as our final opening hand is one that I'm kind of interested to talk about. We get Marshflats, Bloodstained Mire, Dino DNA, Reckless Handling, Inventor's Fair, Imperial Seal, and Emergent Zone. So this hand has a lot of potential options. I think what I would try to do is probably play out Marshflats and go get Badlands on turn 1, so we could then go Imperial Seal, paying 2 life, and get out a Dockside. Particularly if this deck seems like it's going to be positioned in such a way that there's going to be multiple other people putting out multiple mana rocks, I think that's the best approach. If that doesn't seem like it's going to win us the game, we do have the option to instead try to use Reckless Handling to go get a Cloudstone Curio. And with Cloudstone Curio, if Dockside is enough, it may enable us to start looping and win the game that way. It kind of shows the speed of what this deck is capable of. Like, this is threatening a turn 3 win. And we have the fantastic backup plan that if our Dockside Extortionist is countered, if it's destroyed, we don't care, because we have Dino DNA, and as long as we're able to get at least 7 treasures out of it, we can make an unbounded number of Dockside Extortionists who are also Tyrannosauruses, which yeah, that's going to win the game. So I hope you liked this deck. It's one that I'm really excited with, and I have to give shout outs to a couple of folks. Bust, one of my good friends over on the cEDH server, gave me some recommendations with adding Sacrifice and also Burnt Offering to the deck. Excellent choices, Bust. Thank you as always. I also have to shout out TC900. This is a friend of mine from a couple of other servers, but especially Fervent Alchemist server. And as someone who is really experienced with Rakdos decks, they gave me so much help in trying to tune this list, as well as to help me understand some of the more intricate ways you can build in Rakdos to make sure you're not just going for speed, but also going for a lot of potential power and resiliency. Without those folks, this deck would not be possible, and I owe them big time. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know about it. You can leave us a comment here on YouTube, where we are part of Commander Cookout Media Group. You can also find us on Twitter, where we are at GemstoneMineMTG, or you can send us an email, gemstonemindpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm John, and this is Gemstone Mine.